Welcome to the Value Builder Podcast, where we focus on real estate with a value-add mindset. Real strategies, real operators, real outcomes. Let's dive in.
All right. Welcome, Value Builder community. Today, I have Joe Terzano. He is shedding a light for us about commercial property insurance and what do we need to know when we try to get a quote from a broker or from insurance provider. Joe is someone who is coming out and inspecting the property, and he's communicating back to the insurance provider, telling what's good, what's bad. So for me and for you guys who are operating properties, this is going to be really good insights to prepare our properties in the best light so we can get the best quotes and what to look out. And I have some other, of course, questions to Joe about insurance in general. How do we need to operate our properties and get the best insurance from his perspective? Joe, welcome to the show. Maybe to start off, maybe you can give us a little background. What do you do, and how do you end up in this field?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yep. How I ended up in this field it's a long story. So, the best way to say it is I've lived many lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a plumber once upon a time. I worked in the oil field out on the rigs in the Gulf of Mexico. I worked in the woods of northern Michigan for many years, and I owned a coffee shop in Costa Rica. So
All
I've done many
right,
different
that's
things.
awesome.
So, I would say that the insurance industry found me. So, I come from the school of hard knocks, right? So early on, the basic overview for me, frankly, it's part of my story is that I was homeless when I was 17 years old, and I just had to figure out how to make things work. So, like many of us have. And after working hard, I ended up getting a call from a friend of my brother's, actually, who was looking for somebody in northern Michigan to inspect properties for a large company. I didn't think the job was real. And lo and behold, it was. And I was with that organization for about 23 years. So I'd go out and inspect properties for commercial property carriers, gather that information, send it back. And now and over the past 12, 13 years, I've been on the other side of that. So I'm working directly with the carriers and with those decision makers on finding solutions for them in those commercial property inspections. So the organization I'm with now is Safeguard Properties. I operate in our division of Safeguard Insurance Solutions as a vice president of commercial lines.
Yeah, definitely. I've met maybe even your representatives from your company, but let's say for our listeners to unpack this. What let's think that it's industrial property. I do own a lot of industrial property, as many of the listeners. So let's say we try to get a quote from insurance provider, send you to the property. So tell me, what are you actually looking to find at this property, and what are you communicating? And I just want to, we want to understand exactly what insurance providers are looking for. And with that, I will, just would like to hedge our decisions, how to renovate property, what to improve in order to get those best policies. It would, flying, would pass with the flying colors of our properties.
Sure, sure. It's rates, right? Look, I've said this for years in that, most business owners, if you're a hamburger maker, you're concerned with making the best hamburger possible. And insurance is just something you need to have in case of emergency, right?
Yeah,
So you're not thinking about insurance. You're thinking
exactly.
about what you need to do to make your business grow.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not really an exciting topic. I tell most of my friends when they ask me what I do or about the industry, I said, look, call me around midnight when you can't get to sleep. I'll tell you about what I do and it'll put you right to sleep. But to those who are interested in industry and what factors are involved in all this, it can be very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Starting off is when insurance carriers, the reason they're going to send someone out is for a couple of different reasons. Number one is they need to understand what they're right. So Saul, if I said, look, I've got a great car for you and it's a great price, you're going to want to get eyes on that. You're going to want to see it. You're going to want to touch it. You're going to want to drive it. You're going to want to make sure that, the wheels aren't falling off before you put the money down for that. So insurance companies are in effect wanting that as well. They want to understand what they're covering. So if you have a commercial building, it could be manufacturing, it could be a restaurant, it could be offices.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing they need to understand is what we call COPE data. And that's an acronym for construction, occupancy, protection, and exposure. So going down that line, construction, we look at construction in the insurance industry in 6 different categories. And this was developed by Insurance Services Office, ISO, many years ago. And it's the industry standard now. And it starts with construction class 1 would be a frame building, stick built, just like most likely the homes that you and I are in. And then that 6 would be a modified fire resistive building where it has materials that it's constructed of that are not likely to burn in a fire. And there's everything in between there, right? So that's the construction aspect. What kind of building is this? If there was a fire there, what would happen?
Makes sense.
Next is occupancy. Are you the sole occupant? If you are, what do you do? Are you making widgets? What are you making those out of? Are you making those out of plastic? Is there flammable or combustible materials involved? Where are they stored? How are they stored? So that's the occupancy. Now, you could just be an office, but maybe in that same building is something that's a little bit more hazardous.
Mm-hmm.
And insurance companies need to understand that. They need to know what's there.
Mm-hmm.
Next is protection. What are those features that are there protecting that building? Is there a sprinkler system installed? If there is, the inspector is going to look a little bit deeper into that. Just because there's a sprinkler system installed doesn't mean that it's going to operate. So they need to understand, when was it tested? There are standards for all these things, right? When was it tested? Where are the heads? Are they blocked? Are they operational? Are they going to operate when needed? How old is the system? And then last is exposures.
Now, can I ask you a question on the sprinkler system? Just a really
Yeah,
specific case, right? We had a
sure.
Milwaukee property, remember? And so how deep would you typically go? So you go in, let's say the sprinkler system is there. I'm assuming you need to understand if it's dry system or wet system.
Mhm.
And one was inspected last time, but do you also check if that's sufficient enough per municipality code? So, some municipalities, we have different loads for different type uses, right? So in one, we had a case, I remember when Milwaukee changed the requirements for certain uses, so in the past, the sprinkler system still was okay, but by new code is not okay. So I'm just thinking, if you would would you go the rabbit hole, just verifying if that's applicable to the current code?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Mhm.
And that's a question that I would hope somebody who is a business owner who owns, or a building owner, is going to want to know these things. So first and foremost, everything is looked at through NFPA, National Fire Protection Association. What are their standards? Because generally those are the standards that are going to supersede anything else.
Mhm.
Of course, there is the authority having jurisdiction. There's your local authority, but most likely those local authorities are not going to be lesser than
Mhm.
NFPA.
Mhm.
They may be greater than, and then you may have to abide by those, but most likely they're not going to be lesser than. So when you're looking at sprinkler systems, first and foremost, they need to be maintained. And what that means is that there's a main drain test on all of these, whether it's a dry system or a wet system. It's a 2-inch valve, and every year that should be turned all the way on by a qualified service provider for that system to make sure that water is flowing adequately. You'd be surprised after that valve is turned on. Sometimes you can hear rocks in the system. Maybe it wasn't adequately flushed. Maybe, there's a problem with the water supply. So a qualified individual is going to come out and maintain that. And that's per NFPA specifications. The results of those tests, per those specifications, are left on or near the riser so that any inspector coming through can see that. That could be a local inspector, or that could be for your insurance as well. And then secondly, what you touched on was design. How is that system designed? So if this building was initially built as an office building, it was
Mhm.
designed to protect the contents within an office, some furniture, desks, things like that. Now, if that building has been sold and now it's manufacturing, maybe that load is higher. And so that design is inadequate. So that system needs to be recalced and redesigned for the occupancy that's in that current building.
Mhm.
And that's specifically because if there is a fire, you want to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. It's going to suppress that fire until the fire department can show up and then take over from there.
Hmm.
So, yep, there's a lot of details. When an inspector goes out for insurance, anyways, they're going to verify number one, the main drain test results. They're going to check some components on the system just to make sure that it's number one, not been tampered with. Number two, that it's in a safe location. If it's subject to freezing, like in Milwaukee or where I'm at in Michigan, then it needs to have the adequate facility and location for it to not be subject to freezing conditions.
Hmm.
And then thirdly is that design. So per NFPA specifications, a design for a sprinkler system must be posted on or adjacent to the riser so that anyone can go in and see how the system was designed and what it was designed for.
Hmm. Hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, that's great. What about roofs? I'm just curious. We in the past had, codes came out in all kind of shapes because of the roof. How deep are you going in a roof inspection, and what do we need to be aware of?
Sure. Well, within the industry, roofs are a real challenge, right? And the reason they're a challenge is because most inspectors don't have access to roofs. For years, we've been trying to figure out how do we do this inexpensively and accurately. So in the field, there's a couple solutions. One is camera pulls, literally extension poles that you put a camera on that can go and you can put the camera on and then turn it and take photos and get some that way. It's an effective way. It does work, but it doesn't work for all. If you have a very high building, it's not possible. If you have a sloped roof, it may work just fine, right? You're going to be able to get into areas like that. Roof access is important because look, most insurance carriers, if they're hiring a subcontractor to go out and look at that building, or if they have their own in-house staff, they don't want their folks getting on the roof unless it's very safe, right? That's a liability. So number one is roof access. If you have safe roof access, through interior door, then you can get on the roof and ascertain the condition of that roof. Anything else is a little more tricky, right? We tried drones. Drones were all the rage years ago, drones, but you need to be able to have number one, a license to be able to fly that drone. Number two, it's not cheap. It's not a
Hmm.
cheap solution. So the industry has gone the way of more detailed aerial imagery.
Hmm.
And what that that is basically planes that fly over the US. In most urban areas, it's once a year. In rural areas, it's every other year. And they get very, very detailed images.
Images, yeah.
And those are provided.
Hmm.
They're much better than any satellite image you would get from Google. They're more recent. So that is the solution that the industry's really that they've gone to. There's plenty of companies out there providing that information.
But typically, who's examining those pictures? Is that you, or that's underwriter who's writing the policy?
The underwriter is, if they're going to order that from a third party, that third party has built in most likely analytics that are already giving you through machine learning and AI some highlights about that roof, right? So they'll take that image, the system will analyze it and let you know if there's water pooling on a flat roof, if there's any tree overhangs or anything like that that could potentially be an issue with that, and it'll be provided right in a report. It's amazing technology, and it's only growing and getting better.
Now, from our perspective, operator's perspective, do you think is there any use or any benefit to, let's say, if I have maybe drone pictures myself, will I have some kind of reports from the previous seller, which is another challenge by itself of buying the property. A
Always.
lot of times there is no reports, but is it worthwhile for me chasing those reports that provided to, or maybe order those third-party reports before you guys come out, or there's no benefit to that?
I mean, anytime you can provide information, mostly if it's been gathered by and developed by a professional in that industry, it's always going to be beneficial, right? It's always going to be something that an underwriter can look at and say, okay, we have some good testing information or evaluation. So data. It's all about data, right? That's the world we live in. So the more accurate and the more trustworthy that source of data, that's the most important. And really, in the world that we're in right now, where everything is, everyone's nervous about AI and how it's going to take over jobs and different things. Look, there is currently, to my knowledge, there is no replacement for an individual who's an expert in their field walking through and around a building. There's just no replacing that, right? So if you're able to get someone who's an expert in their field, who's able to ascertain those risks and send those back in real time, that's pretty fantastic. And I think that's going to be around for quite a while. So in my industry, talking to my customers, look, we have experts on the field nationwide. We can get that information to you and with clear photos and a clear understanding of what's going on site.
Makes sense. Now, so are you suggesting also that we, as owners of the property, should have those inspections done prior we go shopping for insurance policies, so we can make decisions what to improve before we shop, or no? Or that's not typical?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, look, there's always different levels of how granular an individual is, right? I know for me, I like to have a real clean car, right? I like the inside of my car to be just so, and everything's just right. And I don't like, a bunch of stuff inside clutter. But if I jump in my wife's vehicle, it's a bit of a mess, right? And she's completely fine with it. Not because she's a messy person, but she likes it her way. So everyone's kind of different on how they want to go about things. Some people can look at a property and say, you know what, I've taken a look at it. I've gotten certain paperwork. It looks fine. I'm good to go with it. Others might want to be a little bit more granular. I would say that for anyone who's operating in a brick and mortar building with an occupancy, with a business type that is more of a higher hazard, they should be aware of some of the most important things that carriers are looking for that can drive rates up. So, if you're looking at any building that's sprinklered, learn about that. If you're owning that building or you're even leasing that building, it's still going to affect your rates. It's going to ultimately affect your rates. So know the system. Understand just the basics of when it was serviced, who serviced it, and make sure that they're there on a regular basis. That's really important. If you're running a restaurant, for example, there's a lot of hazards that go with a restaurant. If you're cooking with a fryer or you have a more detailed cooking line, understanding that how this equipment is installed, where it is in proximity to other pieces of equipment, how that hood system is installed, how it's protected. You really have to know that, because if you don't, and you're just focused on making the best burger, your rates are going to be sky high because there's a good chance that your equipment isn't maintained or installed correctly. So it's good to have a base understanding.
For the owners to have an understanding about the system, that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. Anything else you can think of? What do we need to be ready at inspection so you can, provide the care to get the clarity? I'm just thinking, for example, with appraisers, right? When the bank sends an appraiser, I typically like to meet them, and especially show them our detailed operating expenses so it can be properly allocated between capex and opex. Because if you don't provide it and just leave them to their imagination, a lot of times they just put an average which do not work for my property, and it just queues up the NOI. So I'm not sure if there is any analogy to insurance where you letting to anyone's interpretation how that it is. Are any crucial pieces of information, or maybe the owner must be at an inspection? What are the tips from your side you should have for us
Yeah.
to make sure that we don't blow up that inspection?
Yeah. Look, Saul, that's a great question. And look, first and foremost, we're all human beings trying to do a job.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the starting point. So the inspector isn't there to get you. He's not your enemy. He's there doing a job. He's there just trying to provide the best information that he can so that he's doing an adequate job for his boss. We're all answering to someone. Your boss might be your customer. Your boss might be someone who's a supervisor. We all have to answer to somebody. So just be a good human and be helpful. So if you know that someone's coming out to assist, there's an inspector, gather as much paperwork together as you can that you think may be helpful. They may say, you know what, I don't necessarily need that. Or they might say, hey, this is great. Thank you very much. But know that they're there to do a job, right? There's a level of efficiency. Most inspectors who are on site are there to gather the information as efficiently and as correctly as possible, but they want to get in there and get out, because most likely they have another one to get to right after that, and then another after that. So In my experience, I've dealt with both, right? Once upon a time when I was working in the field many years ago, I'd worked with some great people who understood, hey, look, this is just part of doing business, right? And if I can be of assistance, that makes my job easier. It makes the whole experience better
Mhm,
for everyone. But I've also run into people who make it difficult
mhm,
and have chosen to be difficult.
mhm,
And, you know, if you don't like that an inspector showed up and you say, look, we don't want you here, you're going to have to beat it. We don't need an inspection.
mhm.
Either you're going to have to get a different policy
Yeah,
or and even then you're going to have an inspector come back out.
exactly.
So just work with them. We all have a job. Just be helpful. So that's my advice is, try not to get in the way, answer questions, be open, be honest, be thorough, and, know that it's to your benefit. I'll tell you one real quick anecdote. When I first, many, many years ago, started this job inspecting, I struggled a little bit with, gosh, these are small businesses that are really just trying to carve out a living in a rural area, and I'm going in there and I know the rates are going to go up because they have a lot of issues. And I felt kind of bad for that. And then one morning, it was probably right around this time of year. It was after the weekend, and I was driving out to another location to go and look at a building. And there was a site that I was passing, and the building had burnt to the ground.
Mhm.
And that to me was a wake up moment saying, you know what? Many of these items are life safety. And if it saves somebody's life or business or livelihood, then it's worth it. And there is a value to that. So understand that some of these things can really, really make a big difference.
Yeah, totally makes sense, 100% for sure. I have another specific question. Maybe you have an opinion on that. So the situation, for example, I have sometimes in the multi-tenant buildings, industrial, say some tenants have higher hazard use, and for example, the pallet company, and the rest of them is maybe like light storage, and there's no flammable hazard. But since it is a multi-tenant building, your premium is higher for entire building. Have you seen any mechanisms how to pass that increase of the premium just only to that tenant, or maybe there is a way to combine two different policies, or any other tips you can think of, so I can reduce that premium, because let's say it's only 10% of the space that one use has a little bit more flammable, but you're getting dinged on entire building for higher premium.
Yeah. So that goes to that E part of the cope, the
Hmm.
exposures, right? So what are the other exposures? And the O part, the occupancies. What are the other occupancies in the building? So multi-occupancy buildings are a little tricky, right? They're all over the US, and oftentimes you can have very innocuous, very, very plain Jane type occupancies. And then you've got one maybe that is a little tougher, right? And maybe it's a higher hazard, and those hazards really aren't controlled very well. I can't speak for the underwriter and how they do that, but what I can tell you is that oftentimes when it comes down to the rating portion of that building is looked at as a whole, but the occupants are looked at as individuals as well.
Hmm.
Like any type of risk mitigation, you have to look at everything. You just have to, right? And again, this is for the benefit of the tenant and for the building owner as well, right? I don't have a really good workaround or easy answer for that.
Yeah,
Multi-occupancy buildings are just tough, right? They can be pretty tough. If it's all offices, then that's great. If it's all the same occupant, then you know what you're getting into, right?
yeah.
So yeah, there's no real easy answer to that, except, depending on what you're doing, you may not want to be in the same building as someone who's selling fireworks.
That makes sense. Yeah, it totally makes sense. Yeah, for sure. We're always looking for easy button, but a lot of times there is no easy button. Just have to be a right button.
Well, in its location, right? So maybe that higher premium is worth it to you because the location is a premium location, and
That's
that's where you're
mostly.
going to get your traffic, right? It depends on what you do. Uh, yeah, it's really based on what the type of business you're operating and what you're looking for out of that location.
That's awesome. This is great. All right, so we're at top of an hour. I usually like to finish our conversation. And you have a pass on the questions, a more personal question. But the question is, if you could go back and talk to 25-year-old Joe, what did you tell him? What did you tell him right now in terms of a
It's a good
career?
question. Me having a conversation, well, at 25 years old, I had a lot that was already kind of going on in my life.
Mhm.
I think I would say, don't worry, take your time, pay attention.
And everything is going to work out. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
All right. So where do the listeners can find you? If you want to reach out to you, what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, and you can find me on LinkedIn under Joe Terzano. Generally respond to any messages that come in. I'm pretty easy to access. So yeah, that's a bit to get a hold of me. And yeah, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, I thank you for the time. I hope you enjoy the holidays. And I don't know where you're located, Saul.
I'm in Chicago.
You're in Chicago.
Yeah.
All right.
And what part of Michigan you are?
I'm up north in Traverse City.
Traverse City, nice. I used to
Yeah.
go there to kiteboard. I haven't been there for over 4 or 5 years, but they have really good wind. I remember in August.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're getting a good amount of snow here. I'm sure you are there. I spent about 2 years in Chicago in the Midtown area and
That's great.
or Uptown area, I should say. And I really enjoyed it. Chicago's a great town.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you very much, Joe. Happy holidays. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Hope to catch up sometime soon again. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Value Builder podcast. For more strategies, stories, and episodes, head to valuebuilder.co or subscribe on your favorite app. Always make it better than you found it and keep adding value. See you in the next one.